as far as this long day of teaching Jesus has here. So here's the question that they brought to him. Sadducees said, a woman was married to a man, and he died and left no children. Of course, the law of Moses had it where if a man was married to a woman, died with no offspring, then the brother would marry the woman and bring up offspring in the name of the dead brother. Well, in their little example here, as this went through 7 brothers. Woman's married to a man, had no children. He died, married a brother, had no children. Their next brother had no children. They went through 7 brothers. So their question is, in the resurrection, I don't believe in the resurrection, but they put the resurrection in their question. In the resurrection that you believe in, whose husband is she going to be? She had all 7 of them. So whose husband is she going to be? I mean, whose wife is she going to be? Which will be her husband in the resurrection? Jesus came out naturally. He did it, seems like, in a very polite way, if you will. He says, in the form of a question, are you there not for mistaken? Are you not mistaken? He says, you don't know the scriptures. You don't know the very 5 books you're talking about here that you believe in, nor you know the power of God. He says, when they rise from the dead, and he put that point in because they didn't believe in the resurrection. When they rise from the dead, there's neither marriage nor given in marriage because they're all like angels of heaven. Now that doesn't mean they're all going to become angels, but the angels don't marry or given in marriage. There's no marriage among the angels. So that's in that case, you're like the angels. There's no marriage in heaven. You rise. He says, God is God of the living. God is the I am. We've talked about this before. I am. I am always. I am. If you look at the times past, God is I am. Look at the future, God is I am. God is not bound by time. God is always living. And the example he's going to use is from the book of Moses with the burning bush passage, which is Exodus 3, 1 through 6. And Kobe's going to read that for us. Exodus 3, 1 through 6. He talks about the burning bush. And it gets down to the last verse here. Listen to what he talks about. He's the God of who? Go ahead, Kobe.
And he led the flock to the back of the desert and came toward the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire in the midst of the bush. So he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see a great sight, while the bush is not burning. So when the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, God called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. And then he said, Do not draw near this place. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground. Moreover, he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face.
Okay, last verse. Talking to Moses, it says, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Where were Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob at this time? They were dead. Okay? But God is their God. Why? Because they're still living. There is a resurrection, and they're still living. So he takes this passage right out of the Torah, where they got their beliefs, and he says, he's not the God of the dead, he's the God of the living. And therefore he tells them again, you are greatly mistaken. There's a resurrection. God is living. God is always living. Always there. And he was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, even though they've been dead for years, because they were still alive. So then the scribe may have been there and heard this conversation, so okay, I'll get my try now. Or he may have come up separately, we don't know. But he comes and asks, come test him, what's the greatest commandment? Let's come up and ask Jesus, what's the greatest commandment? And Jesus, again, goes back to the Torah, in this case, to the law of Moses. And he says, to love the Lord your God with all your soul, heart, strength, and mind. And he said the second is very much like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. 2 things. Now, Jesus is not doing anything to any way negate or put down the 10 Commandments. These two laws he gave here, It's kind of summarized the Ten Commandments. These are the two that Jesus are the greatest commandments. Then the scribe comes back and says, and the scribe be the one who knows the law, because he's going to be the copies of the law, often called lawyers because they knew the law more than other people did. He comes back and says, you've answered correctly. So he got that. That's kind of the end of that scene. So Jesus said, okay, let me ask you a question. All these questions they've been asking him. He says, whose son is the Christ? The Christ. Whose son is he? And they said, it's the son of David. Now, you got to stop and think about this a minute. Christ is going to be the son of David. They could have said he'd be the son of Solomon, or the son of Rehoboam, or the son of any other of the kings in that kingly line. But they said the son of David. Why? Well, because David is the premier one of the bunch. He's the one, of course, the promise was made to in 2 Samuel chapter 7. So the son of David was the one they're looking for. So David is put in this preeminent position here. Christ will be the son of David. So thinking about that and putting David up at that point there, then he comes in and says, well, why, if he's the son of David, does David call him Lord? Psalms 110, verse 1. Psalm of David. The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand, so I'll make your enemies your footstool. The Lord, all caps, is Jehovah. The Lord, not all caps in this case, is Christ. So God said to Christ, sit at my right hand, so I'll make your enemies my footstool. So why did David call the Christ his Lord? That's the question. Now, Peter uses the same thing when he's in Acts chapter 2, and he's trying to convince the Jews who Christ was that they killed. So let's look at Acts 2, 31 through 36. Scott? Okay. Peter uses this same point here, this same piece of scripture, refers back to it to convince these Jews in Acts 2 who they really killed. This one you killed is the Christ. He's the one that David called Lord. Okay. So if he's David's son, how can David call him Lord? Well, what's the answer? He was living back then. Christ was alive at that time. Called him Lord. They couldn't answer that. And with that question, they quit answering questions. He'd asked them one that they couldn't answer, and that was kind of the end of it. But this point here has made this interesting. The common people heard him gladly. These righteous, self-righteous, religious leaders would not accept who he was. But the common people will look through it and see it and recognize his teaching. So now we move to Matthew chapter 23. If you want to go there, there's a parallel in Mark and Luke, but Matthew 23 is probably the easiest place to follow through this. This is one of the last things Jesus is going to do as far as his teachings. The end of his public teaching is just about to be done. And this is some of the harshest, most straightforward criticism of these righteous Pharisees and scribes that's anywhere recorded. And he gets down and just really, really puts it on them. Start off, he's speaking to the multitude and disciples more about the Pharisees, and then he turns later in a chapter and talks to the Pharisees themselves. And this verse he says to them, the scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. And doing some reading about that, it seems that in some of the synagogues there was a chair in the center up front for teaching that was referred to as Moses' seat. When you were sitting in that chair and teaching the law, you were teaching as Moses would be teaching. So you're teaching what Moses would teach. You recall that's Moses' seat. You're sitting there teaching Moses' law, if you will. So whether it's actually that he's referring to, or whether it's just the fact that they were representing the law as Moses would teach it. He said, what they tell you, do. They're teaching you right. They're teaching you from the law of Moses. They're teaching what you should be doing. You're living under the law of Moses, of course. But the point he says is, don't do what they do. Don't do what they do, the way they live, the way they act. They're hypocrites. They put burdens on you that they won't do. They try to bind things on you that they won't do themselves. Because their work's all for show. They're hypocritical. So he says, listen to their teaching. Because they're teaching you what's right. But don't act. Don't do the way they do. They love the cheap seats. They want that preeminence. We'll see humility in a minute. They want to be called rabbi. Rabbi means teacher, but it means my great one. It's referring to a person as my great teacher. Put him in this spot of special recognition because of who he is. And the Pharisees won't be called rabbi, he said. Make a show with long prayers. He says they'll get the greater commendation because of it. He said, don't be called rabbi. He's going to use two things here, rabbi and father. He says, don't be called rabbi. Don't let somebody put you on this pedestal of my great teacher. He said, there's one teacher. And all of you are just brothers. Then he goes right into the next and says, don't be called father. Let nobody on earth call you father. There's one father. He's in heaven. So what he's putting down here is these special titles and recognitions of greatness that the Pharisees love to have. He's trying to get to some humility. We'll talk about that again a little bit. Then he kind of turns to the scribes and Pharisees. Talks about them now. Now he's going around and talk to them. He says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. And that's what the language is going to use over and over here now as he goes through this. He says, you shut up the kingdom of God against men, you will let them in. By the way you're teaching, the way you're acting, the way you're doing, he says, you won't go in, and you make it hard for others to go in. They see how you're living, they see what you're doing. They can't get in. And if you do convert someone and get them to follow you, then the way you act, the way you teach them, you make them a child of hell just like you are. Woe to you. And 2 or 3 times he's going to call them blind guides. Blind guides. You don't want to follow a blind guide? He said, you say if you swear by the temple, that means nothing. But if you swear by the gold on the temple, then you're obliged to follow your vow. And he says, which one is greater? The temple or the gold? He says, what makes the gold special? Well, the fact that it's on the temple. But if you swear by the temple, that makes nothing. Well, you got your priorities all mixed up here. He uses the same type thing again. He says, you swear by the altar, there'll be the altar there and the temple grounds. You swear by the altar, that means nothing. But if you swear by the gift that's on the altar, then you're bound to keep your vow. He asks him again, which is greater? Is it the gift or is it the altar that makes the gift special? What's the altar? But you got things all mixed up. Then he talks to him about binding these trivial little, called technicalities, if you will. He mentions three particular herbs: mint, anise, and cumin. This is a picture of a mint with little bitty leaves about the size of a quarter, I guess. Little bitty leaves. And then this is anise, a little bit of seeds in there, and cumin has lots of little bitty seeds. And they were very careful, the Pharisees were, to count out and be sure they gave a tenth to God. So they got these little bitty leaves, little bitty seed, and they would make sure that they count out and gave their tenth to God. What's wrong with that? Nothing, okay? He said, that's good. You should do that. But what you're doing, you're these little trivial things, and you're leaving undone the important things: judgment, mercy, and faith. He tells them, said, you need to do these little things. It's not that they're wrong. You should be doing them. But you're leaving undone the important things. You can't do that, okay? Micah 6, verse 8 kind of sums up this part that they're just kind of leaving out here. He says, he's showing you, man, what is good. What does the Lord require of you? But to do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. Those things are important. Are the mint leaves important? Yeah. But not the point of forsaking these other things. God's commandments are not a menu. We don't say, okay, I'm going to do this one and this one and this one. That's what I'll have for lunch today. No. God's commandments are his commandments. We do all of them. We do all of them. We can't be picky. There's a book I'll mention in passing here that Gardner Hall wrote. I checked to make sure it's still available. It is on Amazon. It's called Conviction versus Mercy. If you haven't read that book, I recommend it to you for some reading sometime. Then he continues his woes against the Pharisees. He says, you clean the outside of the platter, the dish, but you don't clean the inside. And the inside, he's talking about their lives, the inside is full of cheating and stealing and selfishness. Again, you're blind guys. What you want to see, you want the outside to be pretty. What you want people to see to be pretty. But what's inside is rotten. Clean the outside, clean the inside, and in the process of cleaning the inside, you'll get the outside cleaned up. Start with the inside, get it right, and what you're doing outside will be good. He used another example then of whitewashed tombs. He said, tombs are pretty. You get them all whitewashed. What's inside? Dead men's bones, okay? You can't make that pretty. So they appear righteous to men. But inside, hypocrisy, lawlessness. You can't just paint the white stuff on the outside and make it pretty. That doesn't fix it. This is a picture Trent gave me from the shooting the Mount of Olives over toward, it's just the Dome of the Rock. It's the Temple grounds up here. So it's the Kedron Valley down here. And you see all these graves up through here. And right along, this is the wall around Jerusalem over here. All along through here, as I remember, are graves over here. And Trent said that evidence that the graves there have gone back years and years and years and years, even to the time of Christ, the graves there. Just imagine these things, and it's limestone rock type things, that they would take and put this whitewash on to make them white and pretty. But the outside, but what's inside those things? You can't take a person that's rotten inside and paint white on the outside and make him right. You got to change the inside first. He taught them some more. He said, you build these burial vaults for the prophets, and you decorate the tombs. You make things pretty. And you say, well, if we'd lived back when our fathers were living, when the prophets were coming to our fathers and teaching them, if we'd lived back then, we'd have done different. And he said, all you're doing is you're admitting that your sons are the prophets, and those fathers of yours was one who killed the prophets. They ignored what they were teaching. That's really why you're the mess you're in now. They didn't listen to them. He said, just go ahead and act like them. You should act like your fathers. And he calls them snakes. You brood of vipers, or you children of vipers. That's the way you're acting. And the last thing he says, this is really the end of his public discourse, public comments. He turns and talks about the city of Jerusalem, which is where he is there. And he says, you, that's what he's been talking about, it's the prophets. You who stoned the prophets, kill those that were sent to you. How often? I want to gather you together as children together, like a hen puts the chicks under her wings. But you wouldn't do it. You're not willing. You wouldn't listen to me. And now your house is left desolate. For you're not going to see me anymore. This is the end of it. You'll see me no more until you see me coming when you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Which I've done all the teaching I can do, and you rejected it. I tried to get you together. I tried to get you to listen. Like the mama hen gathering all the chicks under, but you wouldn't have it. It's supposed to be bad for you. There's one more little story that's tacked in here that happens sometime this day. We don't know exactly when. As we normally know it as the widow's mite. Jesus was sitting there in the temple doing this teaching, and he's observing the people casting their gifts into the treasury. And many of the rich people came by, and they put in much. But this widow came by, and he put in 2 mites. And some of the reading I'm doing, trying to calculate how much that is. We talked about a denarius or a penny being worth a day's wages. It seems like, for the commentators, this is like 1/64th of a day's wage. I mean, it's worth a few hours, a few minutes almost worth of work. It's almost nothing compared to what all the rich folks were putting in. But Jesus said, she's put in more than any of them. They gave out of this big abundance they had. They wouldn't miss it. But she gave everything she had. She gave her livelihood. She gave it all. And what was it Paul said? You first gave yourselves. All right, a couple of viewpoints right quick. Go back to this about not knowing the scriptures. You're therefore mistaken because you don't know the scriptures. You see a lesson for that? See a little lesson for us maybe there? Mistakes we make. Why? Because we don't know the scriptures. That's exactly what Jesus told the Sadducees. You're wrong. You're wrong because you don't know the scriptures. And then this thing of I am. We've talked about this several times last quarter and this quarter. It's just hard for us to imagine a being that is always. Jesus was back in this point in time. Well, the word time doesn't even apply. Jesus will be at this point. The word time doesn't apply. Deity, God, Jesus are there. Always. It's just more than we can almost comprehend, just to think about. Always. He said he's the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Yeah, he is. Was then, is now, will be always. Always. Then this lesson in humility. He's getting on the scribes and Pharisees because they want to be somebody special. They want to be called rabbi. I'm your great teacher. I'm somebody special. Recognize me as that. Wearing the special ornaments and clothing and anything, making the long prayers, anything to make me look like I'm somebody. As opposed to the humility We all should have. And this thing of doing the little things and not leave the big things undone brings a pretty good lesson for us too. We don't pick and choose. We don't say, oh, I did this, this, and this. Yeah, but when you did that, your attention there, you forgot, and you didn't do these things that you should have done. No, we do all of it. God's given us what he wants us to do. And we don't pick and choose. We don't do the little things, leave other things undone. All right, we got about 3 or 4 minutes. So I got some thoughts about this. Yes, ma'am.
Christ continues this indictment against the Jewish people. I mean, do the things that are physically, maybe a little physically strenuous, like your tenth of everything, but they're ignoring the things that are true emotional, mental sacrifices. But again, he uses the widow to make this point. And we see Christ's example over and over again that he uses the fringe, the rejected people, the tax collectors, the prostitutes. The widows are another class that the Jewish people, these Pharisees, have rejected. She's poor, she's destitute, all she has to live on are 2 mites. But she's the one that's focused on the weighty matters of the law. So she's giving this mental, emotional sacrifice that they've all used.
If we don't get it inside, if we don't get it in our being, we can do all the outward stuff that we want to. We can appear outside to be whitewashed and I'm serving. But if we don't get Rebecca used the word mental, if we don't get the inside, don't get it in our head and we're serving from the inside out, it means nothing. And he did go to the lower class. Those are the ones who would believe in the common people. I had on the slide already. The common people accepted it. I was reading a book of Revelation, and it's talking about the persecution that they went through under some of the Roman emperors. And in most cases, it wasn't the elite people that were Christians. It was the common people, the lower class people that would accept the teachings of the apostles, and as it spread through, this case, Asia Minor. And that's what just got the Romans even worse upset, because you're taking the scum of the earth here and you're going to make them somebody special out of them. That's what Jesus did. He taught those who would listen. If you're so high and mighty inside that you're not going to accept me, you're not going to listen to me anyhow. That's exactly what the Pharisees were. He calls them blind guys, hypocrites. You got to be careful, folks. Me included. Get it right inside. Let the outside come out. Okay? All right, Wednesday night, if you would, read Matthew 24 and 25. Where do we get into Wednesday night? Get into Matthew 24. 25 ties in with it. And I'm going to tell you now, I'll put a piece on the screen. This is some of the hardest text in the whole Gospels to figure out how to divide it. Now, nothing wrong with it. Of course, it's all inspired. But how to rightly divide it between the destruction of Jerusalem and the second coming of Christ. It's difficult. We'll talk about that Wednesday night. Okay?